Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Douwen. I'm the host of this session, and I see we're over 100 participants in this wonderful meeting about healthy urbanization. I'm going to ask everybody to mute and also turn off your video, please, because I'll explain in a bit why that is. So if everybody would also, yeah, thank you very much. Almost there, because the software, of course, of this program focuses on the one that is talking. And when we are going to continue start this session, you will be able to see the one talking next to the slides that they're sharing, which is, of course, always nice. I'm Tom Damen. I'm an associate professor at TU Delft, and I'm very happy to also be the chair and director of the Foundation for Area Development Knowledge in the Netherlands, which is a network of public, private, and civic organizations working on what we call gebiedsontwikkeling in Dutch. Um, uh, it'll take a different session to explain what that is exactly, but we are focusing on urbanization in the Netherlands and to see in terms of planning, governance, finance, civic engagement, and other topics to see how we can improve the practice of gebiedsontwikkeling. And today we're focusing on a topic, a theme, or maybe even an ambition to add our let's say societal needs about health and a healthy let's say lifestyle and environment to integrate the wishes and demands which are related to that concept of health into our plans and projects in cities in the Netherlands, but also, of course, beyond. And we're very happy to be able to address that topic in collaboration with the University of Amsterdam and the SLIM Foundation, which has supported us for several years in collaborating together with the University of Amsterdam on different topics about urbanization planning and the development of spatial projects. So this is also why Federico Savini, who is in your screen, is also with us today, who has had the opportunity to have a wonderful yearly studio, a master studio with some of you who are in the audience as master students also have followed that studio, that course last month. And of course, everything online, but Federico will explain further a little bit about that. But as he has told us just before we went online, the students have worked very hard last month to learn about health in relation to urbanization issues. But Federico, I'm very happy that you are with us today to also tell us a little bit more about that, what you've learned during the studio, and what your take is on this theme, and what you hope we will address this afternoon when we dive into particularly the practice in Amsterdam on this topic and issue. So I'll first give you the floor. After that, we have three other speakers who will talk about practice in Amsterdam and let's say the steps that we are taking together about getting our heads around the issue of healthy urban environments and health in urban development projects. And I'm very happy that we will be able to share that with you this afternoon. If you have questions, please post them in the chat, and then I will try to address them, or even maybe give you the floor to ask one of or more of the speakers about your question. So thanks for that. And I will firstly give Federico the floor. Federico, you need to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. for the kind introduction. And again, I would like just to stress, I'm very happy of this cooperation between TU Delft and UvA, which is kindly supported by the Slim Foundation. And usually we would have this meeting somewhere in person in Amsterdam, in the Pakhuis des Zwijger. Is usually a nice meeting where, in fact, we have a really lively discussion with experts. This year we do it online, but I'm very happy to see that there are 130 people, more than 130 people joining. So this is just maybe it testifies how important health has become for our cities. This sounds very obvious, but this was quite the realization that was behind the program of the Master Studio.
Dat is denk ik precies het gesprek waar we het dan inderdaad over moeten hebben. Ja.
Somebody is talking. Yes. Now it's okay. So I was saying this was quite the realization that was behind the Master Studio Future Cities that was organized last month in January. It's a studio that takes place as a full week of meetings, lectures, excursions with students and professionals. I posted the link on the chat and I invite you to have a look. The studio of this year was addressing one key question, which many planners have in mind today, which is what planning approach can we imagine in order to explicitly improve the urban health in our cities. This question, which is quite a broad question, specifically points out that there is a possibility to imagine planning oriented to the goal of healthcare and well-being. This requires quite a shift in thinking from a planning practice that is oriented to all kinds of other sectors, from economic to environmental to social and residential, to one that is perhaps has been for many decades quite an exclusive competence of a relatively defined sector of policymaking, that of healthcare. The question of our studio was really to engage in this, the notion of planning with the one of health and well-being. We had three ambitions in this studio as a starting point of our discussion, was to rethink planning in regard to health from a reactive approach to a preventive approach. So thinking in terms of healthcare as a prevention that takes place in cities, first of all. Secondly, we were trying to rethink urban health from an individual to a community perspective. So imagine thinking about urban health as an individual lifestyle choice, as an individual prevention, to one that includes relations between individuals within neighborhoods, within housing, within public space. And the third ambition we had was to move from an exclusively physical approach to urban health to one that included explicitly the mental dimension of health. So cities are regularly, let's say, planned for us to move, for walking, accessing green in many cases. We wanted to bring in a new dimension, which was the dimension of mental stress, anxiety, even more significant mental illnesses like depression or schizophrenia. So we try to include also this dimension within the health perspective of planning. The studio was organized as a week. We had all kinds of experts introducing their work. And we also produced 9 podcasts of half an hour each, which will be soon available, hopefully, for the public. Podcasts that address different dimensions of planning and health. Now, what were the conclusions that came out of this studio and also of the podcast of the students? There were many conclusions, I would say, and there is not really one unitary conclusion, but there are 4 points that I would like to stress, and maybe they're useful to open up the discussion in the rest of the meeting today. The first, very important, is that the point of the so-called territorial care. What we see in cities today is that the more modern approach to healthcare, which involves quite highly specialized center of health provision, like big hospitals near or within cities, is changing radically due to economic, financial, but also the demographic change of cities. What we see is an emergence of the so-called territorial care of proximity, meaning that healthcare is provided as close as possible to the living space of inhabitants. This means also that planning needs to address the requirement of this healthcare within all the different areas and neighborhoods of the city. The challenge is basically to rescale urban health from a more regional, perhaps national perspective on specialized center to one that is more distributed within cities. I have to say the effect of the COVID pandemic put a lot of stress on this territorial healthcare, meaning our outsource, our center of diagnosis, test centers, all these different facilities that are scattered through the urban areas. And this is the challenge for the coming years, according to at least the presenters of our studio. The second conclusion or insight that we gain from the studio is that of preparedness, the capacity of being prepared to shocks and unexpected events like a pandemic that hit cities and that were somehow unexpected. This is a concept that is very similar to that of resilience, in fact, which stresses the capacity of the urban system to react and adapt to stress. But the idea of preparedness also stresses the importance of having a reactive infrastructure ready to address health crises, such as this pandemic and the next one to come. It's quite clear by now that this will not be the last one. So planning would need to explicitly also address this aspect of how to be prepared for extreme health situations like the one we're witnessing today. The third insight is that it's quite an obvious insight, but maybe it's not so obvious for planners, is that mental health and physical health go together. Now, the most classic way to think in terms of planning and health in cities is that of producing green spaces and sport facilities and areas for pedestrians in order to easily have a healthy lifestyle, moving at least 30 minutes a day or 1 hour a day and doing exercises and so on and so forth. This is a bit the classic way in which planners think in terms of health and the design of urban spaces and urban areas. There is a different way which is required today, a way that combines these physical requirements of a healthy lifestyle with the requirements of a mentally healthy lifestyle that is related to reduction of stress, reduction of anxiety, reductions of work-life imbalances, all these dynamics that are becoming extremely predominant in the health problems of our populations. This means also to rethink, in fact, the spaces that we originally thought to be exclusively dedicated to physical action, also as spaces of mental regeneration and mental health. This also includes not only green spaces or sport facilities, of course, but also noise in areas, the noisescape of urban areas, and also community facilities, all those facilities that allow people to feel less lonely and to feel more taken care of by the community where they belong to. So the fourth insight stems directly from this one, and I will then stop talking, but I think it's quite helpful perhaps for the next, for the discussion today, is that in order to plan for a better urban health, we need also a new approach to public participation. All the speakers in our course, in our studio, stressed the need of a strong engagement between health providers, planners, and communities as the directly concerned communities of these policies, but also as direct actors that co-produce healthcare and well-being and co-provide healthcare and well-being. Now, the idea of co-production is quite known, and the challenge is to find what are the best modalities to develop it. What we understood is that it's not enough, in fact, to design enough green spaces, design enough silent spaces, or to design enough sport facilities. But what is necessary is to do that in a way that is adapted and custom-made to the needs of the populations that live proximate to those and use daily those spaces. This means, in fact, to co-plan these spaces with the communities at two different scales. One is the large scale, the long-term scale of the city region, thinking in terms of health from the point of view of a system of health services. This is something that, for example, is done today in Amsterdam with the omgevingsvisie, but also in Utrecht with health visions, programs that try to relate strategic planning to health in the long term. And another dimension that needs absolutely to be taken in consideration is the short term and the medium term, that of area development. So projects like the Bias Quartier, which struggle and in order to find a model of co-production that is centered around the challenge of well-being and health of the community of people that will live in those projects. So the strategic and the local scale, the short term and the long term, these are two scales that planning needs to take into serious consideration when thinking about health services. With this, I would like to open the floor for the next speakers and give the space back to Tom, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Federico. Thank you very much for taking us and being so well structured in your in the conclusions that you've made. And I believe I've written them all down, that we will be talking about them a couple of times during this session. One question, Federico, came in from the end, but I believe that looking back at your program that you did address that. But the question is about the role of the, well, it says here Amsterdam UMC, but of course there are other large hospitals. Can you say just a little bit about what role these hospitals played in your program?
Yes, Jasper, we went to AMC. We did, in fact, an excursion there, a virtual excursion. Me and Zef, we went there and we filmed 2 hours the director of logistics of the UMC that explained us the short-term and long-term programs of the restructuring of the hospital service and also of all the services of the UMCs in Amsterdam, the different locations, including the Vrije Universiteit Center Hospital. And it was very interesting to see the way that space was conceived. I mean, it was conceived in a modernist understanding of healthcare, and now it's way too large, and in some cases way too expensive, and they're undergoing through a transition toward a more specialized healthcare provision, balanced by a more distributed general healthcare provision in the city, which is exactly what I was trying to say with my term of territorial care, balancing specialization with distributed healthcare. Yes, the IMC in particular, not all the UMCs, but IMCs was one was part of our program, but the different program, the excursions.
Great, and I believe it speaks to the quality of the program that you've designed, and I think it's also something that connects to one of the conclusions, saying that, well, let's also involve healthcare experts in this, in the planning, next to, of course, the citizens that are that will be using the healthcare or its facilities in their direct environment. I think we'll come back to that definitely later on. I would like to do, before I introduce the first speaker, just one experiment. Can I ask the people that only speak English, or of course another language, but do not speak Dutch, to just turn on their video for just a moment, so just that we know how international this audience is. Denise, welcome. Okay. Yes. Any more? Okay, well, this is the international audience, so welcome to you. I would just like to have a special welcome to you. Did you all follow the studio Federico was talking about? Great. All right, so this just gives the rest of the audience a picture. We have 136 now in the session, so also, of course, welcome to everyone. I would like to introduce Leendert to you all. And Leendert from the Amsterdam Institute of Advanced Metropolitan Solutions. One of what TU Delft is participating in. and a very nice opportunity also to work with AMS in this session. Welcome, Leendert. You're going to talk a little bit with us about your work at AMS. I'm looking quickly at the title that you gave your talk, Spurring Innovation in the Built Environment. And I think in terms of framing, we've talked about this extensively before this session, right? The role of academia, academic research in solving urban problems in general, and in this particular session, addressing the issue of health, but also of other issues that AMS is working on, energy, circularity. You're going to take us a little bit into that world of the interface, I would call it, between academic research, science, and urban problems and solutions, hopefully. And we are very anxious to hear the role that AMS is playing in that and what approach you take to those issues. And I believe you'll touch upon definitely, of course, also on health, but also these other issues. So very warm welcome to you. And I'll give you the floor. I believe you'll be sharing some slides. Yes, and then everyone, again, please feel free to ask questions in the chat so I can address them after Leendert's talk. Leendert, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tom. And it is hard not to start reacting on the fantastic talk by Federico just now about nearness and preparedness. I was just this morning in a conference of the European program on urban innovation, and they even say that for projects to succeed, there should be operational readiness for the innovation. So can you start really innovating? And I guess that's what we're trying to do with the Living Lab program we have here at AMS Institute. So let me share my presentation with you. Can you see it right now, Tom?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, so what I want to do is to take you along the adventure we went into to use urban living labs for urban innovation. And I try to touch upon health, but as you see that AMS Institute has 6 different themes we're working on: mobility, energy, circularity, food systems, data and intelligence, and climate resilience. They all have to do with that people have a better life in being able to reach certain destinations, to have good energy, and to have good food. So the question is, when we started AMS, is how to do that. And AMS Institute is now 7 years old. It was set up by TU Delft, Wageningen University, and MIT in response to a tender by Amsterdam. And they asked, can you help us reinvent cities in challenges on these themes? And in our approach, Living Labs, working together with all stakeholders, is in the middle of what we do. I'm leading a team of a few people who are experts on building and running and learning in living labs. What is a living lab? And there are several definitions. One is a very extensive one by the European Network of Open Living Labs. It's open innovation ecosystems, co-creation, innovation processes, real-life communities. We try to make a little bit more operational one. For us, it's to work together on the iterative development of innovations in a real-life use context, so in the real city. And why we do that is, maybe you know what this ship is. This is a painting of the Titanic, and that's a very old way of steering a ship through the waves, trying to avoid icebergs, very hierarchical. And we are trying to give all the floors, all the levels of such a system a voice, and listen to all the skills and all the interests there are. If you look at the literature on living labs, so how to make labs in real life, you you find the same words all over again. Where they work best is when it's about sustainable and urgent challenges. Where they provide value when there's more disciplines involved in complex problems, and those complex problems show themselves in real life. And how then to approach is there's only one way we think works, and that also reflects on what Federico says on public participation, do it with co-creation. And we think problems are not linearly solved. The complexity makes it necessary to do it iteratively and in learning. And then comes a very important step, and that's include all stakeholders, not only because they are involved by all the innovations, but also that they can help solve the problem. They have needs, they want something, and they have capacities to help solve. And in the types of labs we are building, they're typically in a very wild environment, where the level of control is less than you want in a scientific research lab. And there's a high level of co-creation. So this brings real problems for how to do science in such a wild, uncontrolled environment. And how then to involve all those different stakeholders. That's the challenge we have set upon ourselves, because those stakeholders come from very different origins. And the ones we know very well, because they're part of our founders, that's the Knowledge Institute, the researchers, the scientists. They are experts in their fields. The public actors, so the cities and the city organizations, they are also well organized and well structured, sometimes slow in innovation, but they want to change. It's different when you want to involve users, citizens especially, and private actors, companies who want to make profit. And the user's interaction should not be manipulating of therapy. It should go through the citizen control, the partnerships, the delegated power. And that is what we're trying to do in our program. So what we're trying to do is to bring together two worlds. The world, the hard world of product and project development, and the soft world of learning, of education, inclusiveness, changed attitudes, trust, and learning reports. So how we do that, we've built a process flow, and we call it the Urban Living Lab way of working of AMS. And it leads in several moves into results on both sides of the coin. And to make that work, we've developed a number of tools. And right now, I heard Federico talk about the design week. We are in the middle of a winter school where we are working with scientists, citizens, and companies to learn this design tool to build living labs to innovate in the city. I cannot go into all the details here, but what we have found out that if you go into the urban fabric, it's very important to know what you talk about. So there's a total difference from an experiment, which a scientist wants to do someplace in a building in the city, and a location which is organized to do those experiments, or a program which uses those locations and experiments to achieve a higher goal. And a nice example is a circularity by design program of Wageningen University, where we want to create circular food systems in the city. And finally, how can we learn on all these different labs what method works well, and how can you scale up and replicate the findings? So an example which is going on in the south of Amsterdam, around Gaaspoplas, is to try if we can grow local production of vegetables and herbs to appreciate the heritage and well-being of all those different communities who are living in the city. And in southeast of Amsterdam, there are, I think, 150 different nationalities, and they have their own preferred cooking styles and their own ingredients. Can we now grow them locally? And to make the link to health, to have your own cuisine and to grow your own foods helps in the health. And by involving citizens to then grow those vegetables themselves in greenhouses and other forms of plots, will also increase social cohesion and give satisfaction to people who participate. So here are a few examples: kitchen gardens, greenhouses, but also vertical farming, floating farms and food forestry, which will take place there. Now I would like to switch to the Bijenskwartier, where we are trying to build up a living lab in the Green Tower together with BKO Ontwikkelingsmaatschappij, division of AM. And the idea is to connect this Green Tower to all the challenges which are there in the area, but also which scientists and companies of our network can identify. So how do you use this tower to experiment, innovate, and show results? Also, to make a little link to the health, one of the ideas is that there is also attention to movement and physical activities in that Green Tower, and by connecting the visitors by an educational route to all the experiments taking place. So this is a whole long trajectory we've set into, and you see that there are 6 different topics which are important for the Bijenskwartier. It's a little bit small. It's about energy, it's about green, blue infrastructures, it's about water, it's about energy, and it's about biological cycles and material cycles. And these are partly ambitions of the Bijenskwartier itself, and the Green Tower can then become an example of circular sustainability hub that will accelerate this circular urban development, not only for the Bijenskwartier, but also beyond. These challenges are then formulated more closely, and this is typical in the process of building such a living lab, to find out clearly what are we working on and what are we not working on. It goes a little bit too far to those elaborate on these, but to come back to our lab building activities, and also on the topic of developing areas. I don't know exactly the English word for gebiedsontwikkeling, aerial development I would call it. We distinguish these 4 different types of living labs. The experiments, I talked about it earlier, the locations and the programs and meta labs. And what we now see developing and what we put our shoulders under is that these locations, the Marine Terrein where our offices are, but also southeast with Rijkersbos, Arena Poort, and the Bijenskwartier, and several field labs around the Bridges and Cables program. These areas, these labs, start to form an experimentation and innovation infrastructure for the city of Amsterdam. So what we learn in one area, we can sometimes replicate to other areas and scale up, and sometimes not. And we want to develop an ecosystem where we do that. And of course, we're not alone. So there are labs from HVA and UvA around there, and slowly these are being connected also through the CTO office of Amsterdam. I would like to leave here and just come back to the challenge. This building innovation ecosystem, these building of labs, it is always about bringing together 4 different stakeholders: citizens, companies, scientists, and the city. And by giving all of them power, giving them all a voice, we are sure that we will achieve more valuable, more fruitful, and more impactful innovations. And to do that, we are busy with a research program also to validate our approaches, and we build them around themes. And maybe in the future, also maybe a little bit based on this seminar, some of those can also more explicitly be on health. My colleague Aranka Dijkstra, who's helping on the Bijenskwartier Living Lab, is also in the audience. I would like to give it back to you, Tom. And I hope I've given you an insight in how we are operating with our smaller department at the AMS Institute, together with the city and with the universities of our partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leendert. And I think you've also touched upon and introduced a little bit, just a moment, before my background noise comes in. that you introduced the case of the bioscotier to us already. Thank you very much for that. I think we've also, and that's maybe a question to you in terms of addressing the issues that come up and that sort of emerge in the city. Of course, health has been emerging in the Netherlands in different cities, also in terms of policies and in terms of attention from civic organizations in let's say the past 5 years, and has been something that has now also penetrated the ambitions of this project that we'll be talking about more in depth shortly, but also in your program as you explained it. And I think it's also good for the audience to understand that that's the way we want to frame it today as well. It's something that comes up, emerges from the different discussions and debates in the city about what the city needs. Of course, strengthened and catalyzed, you could say, very much by the pandemic now, but something that is more generic and has been emerging more thoroughly. Can you say something about the approach of AMS in terms of these more emergent issues? How do you, are there certain issues that you will be structurally paying attention to that are sort of secured in your program, and other things that you want to address as they come up, as they are emerging in the different projects or maybe in policy by the city? How do you cope with that dimension of new themes coming up?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And around the COVID and all the restrictions, there was a very strong effort of the TU Delft data science group, and also of our data visualization group, to use data to show where to go and where not to go. Most of our labs are around scientists from Wageningen, Delft and MIT. So the Wageningen link, which is very strong on the, let's say, the agricultural knowledge. We see it around trees, providing a better shading and water conditions in the city. We see it around sensoring. We had a big project where citizens were giving sensors to measure the air quality, and they were were free where to place them. What we do want, but we have to limit ourselves a little bit in time, is what we think is that in the labs, also the bioscotier lab, is we built a lab with its infrastructures, with its finances, with its protocols, how to enter with an experiment. And once it's there, it shows its value to more than the themes for which it's set up. If we really have to develop a new lab on a new theme, that's also possible, but it's very important. So, for instance, your field of expertise and your field of research could very well help us do that. But we're a little bit limited on time, so we should look carefully to our students. Whatever the student wants is what we do. And then second come the scientists. So we also do what the scientists want, but that's how it is. But health is, I would say, everywhere. Also on the marine terrain, where sport and cooling of sports fields is one of the experiments which is done.
Thank you, Leonard. I'll address one more question that came in from the audience, and then we'll go to the next speaker. And I'll please everyone just keep sharing your thoughts. I will definitely in the Q&A session after, you can still come back to some of the questions you posed. Maybe one question, I'll connect it to the Amsterdam Southeast example that you gave. To what extent do you have already some experience in trying to involve citizens to talk about these herbs and vegetables, for example, that are being grown? How does that work? And is it hard to get them involved?
In living lab experimentation, it's always hard to involve citizens because they don't have time and they don't have money. So this will be a very successful one because it's a bottom-up design of a lab already secured from the local interest there, and then it was connected to the science. There are some other ones which in Southeast work on whole facade changes, so total deep retrofits. And there it goes a little bit through the ownership associations, and there it's not always clear that the citizens and the house owners really get a say in the experimentation. So I hope to report on the cultural heritage very soon, because this will go very fast. Mm-hmm. And the challenge there will be that it stays an experimentation area and not a let's say a traditional Volkstuintjes complex. But I think the scientists are on board, the city is on board, companies are on board, and the citizens are on board. This will be a very good one.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I'll move on, and Leonard, please stay with us so we can also involve you in the discussion later on. But thanks for now. I would like to move on and come back to the placemaking question later on in this session, because I really am anxious to give the floor to Johan Snell, who is the studio manager of AM Concepts, and has been involved from the very start in the initiative of building a proposal for the Bijenskwartier area. As Leendert already mentioned, it was a competition set out by the city of Amsterdam for the redevelopment of the old jail cluster at what called the Bijlmer Bijes, and AM and partners came out as the winning proposal. Also here, Johan, we discussed this earlier here. Health emerged as one of the topics that have been part of your proposal eventually, and also has been developing as a theme and ambition in the, let's say, more the implementation or elaboration phase of the plan, and now the project has actually started. Demolitions have been done, and the one tower is going to be refurbished, but you'll talk about that, so I won't go further. But we're very interested, of course, learn a little bit about your approach to the project, the proposal, and the issue of or topic of health within that. But I'm sure you'll take us with you in an inspiring story about what you're trying to achieve at this location. So, Johan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tom. Is the audio okay for you, for all you guys? Yeah, probably.
Very good. Yeah.
Okay. Just a starting point. Thanks for the intro, Tom. Yeah, I tried to set out a bit of context on the project, and what I really like about the previous speakers also is that it's we feel as a company that it's about networking and about putting coalitions together to get into this project situations. I think it's very important that in the early stages of this project, we already sort of the contact of the Wageningen University, but also AMS. We bring together a lot of people who have a lot of knowledge on specific topics, where we are not at our best, so to say. And I think it's really a team effort from the starting point, and a constant learning process also. I prepared a small presentation to also show you a bit on that learning process, and also I'm very curious about feedback on that process and how to be even get more better on that by your side. I have to share my screen. Yep. It's visible probably, yeah, Tom, now.
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always good to ask that question. Yeah, so try to dive a bit on the company itself, and then try to tell you a bit on our research on the site and what we're experiencing at this moment. I think that's very has to do also with the first introduction on scale. This project is about 7 hectares. It's a very specific site, and that is an advantage to really test several things in real life. And that's what we are doing at this moment. It also has to do also with our company when it's about healthy urban living and working. This is for us as a company not new. I think some 4 or 5 years ago, we started as a company thinking about what could be topics, social thematic topics, which are relevant to our company, and also which are relevant to dive into and to experiment, to do research on. And one of these topics is, of course, healthy urban living and working. So the context is not starting from the Bijenskwartier project itself, but it has to do with our own research also as a company in what is relevant, what do we need to do more, and what can we address to all kinds of questions in our country. And so that's and what we try to do, since we are an area developer and a project developer, we really are focusing on bringing the qualities and bring the ambitions of cities into a real project and real life. That's our main goal and task. Yeah, and we do that in all kinds of projects. These are just two small examples. It's good to mention that we also see an office environments where people work. It's not only about living, but also about working, that people experience themes about health and about moving and about a green meeting space in the office. Also within the COVID situation at this point, feel that it's really a crucial part of also a future working context. So that also has our attention. It's not only about living and dwellings. Now then back to the project, for everybody who's not familiar with the location, Amsterdam, and within the red dotted line, you see the site. It used to be a prison site with a very recognizable silhouette consists of 6 towers, one big machine. In fact, it's really one building. It used to be one building, and this was our first initial, the starting point for the tender situation. And what we started off with is to do research on it. Also, again, I think that's something which is really coming up today. Also, we did research on healthy urbanism, even, and what kind of topics could be relevant, and what kind of situations do we see, what kind of possible solutions do we see. So we did some sort of proactive research to the site, and we learned a lot. And so we first dived into the location, dived into the context, even before the tender started or around the tender starting point. So to really dive into the area to see what kind of networks would be there, what kind of relevant context, what kind of useful co-workers and co-production could be there. That was really the starting point of this project. And in the end, without showing the whole tender and the whole first ideas, quite soon in the project, it arose to us that it was about also bringing a healthy urban living space to the city of Amsterdam. Since we have a site with a wall around it, it's a very enclosed site. It used to be a very enclosed site, of course, since it's a prison. We were really, let's say, we thought about bringing all kind of car-free garden situations as the starting point for the living conditions here in Bijenskwartier. So it's really about gardens and about a green atmosphere, and also keeping out the noise. So the noise of rail structures. We're making noise-canceling structures around it, and really make a car-free public space where you are almost forced to walk around. To not go directly from the parking garage into your house, but also to work around, to walk around, and to see other people, to meet up. And within these gardens, quite soon in the tender process, we had this idea of programming all these green spaces with sport, but also people, places to wander, places to meet, a place for small theater. So really programmed public space. I think that's one of the key issues of this project, relating the theme healthy urban living, but it also has to do with the way we develop the different buildings. I come to that point later. Now, one of the first images we produced there as a part of the tender is shows that that site, shows that car-free garden situation, shows some sort of building standing in these gardens, that people walking around in this old and new kind of contrast situation here. Now, with the model which was part of that time, now to give a bit introduction on this project and the site itself. Now, Leendert also mentioned the sustainability topics on the project, and that was it's quite, let's say, integrated sustainability approach, where the whole idea of the healthy urban living is one of the topics, but it's not only about that, but the way all these different sustainability topics are relating to each other and having visible consequences of it. So the scheme, what is part of it has to do with all these topics relating to each other. With the green tower, already a bit shown by Leendert, is let's say the visible identity of this sustainable, healthy urban environment. So on the healthy urban living topic, as one of these 6 sustainability layers, that's why we also do these living labs with Wageningen, with AMS. It's about practice, so make an adaptable plan, not a complete fixed plan, but to try to be able to adapt to new circumstances, to adapt new programs, adapt new kind of parties and people interested in the site. We try to learn what works on the job. So we test some things, and when it's not working, we can, as a company, we can do something else. So learning by doing is very important. And when we address some points and topics what working well, we try to scale that up and to try to redo that in the site itself. So it's a really pragmatic thing. Also, because we need to make the project work. Also, it's not only about research, but also to make the project. Now, the Green Tower by itself is some sort of iconic ID on sustainability, but also showing the green atmosphere, showing the heritage of the site, and showing also the healthy program which is produced there. Some topics, for now it's a bit too far, but really this Green Tower is an iconic idea around the sustainability approach and the way we embrace the healthy urban living. Now, so different kind of projects and different kind of programs there. Climbing wall, we have green spaces but also to produce food, local food production, as Leendert also mentioned. And so it's a bit of a really mixed use program there with the image also shown. And so it's not a complete fixed design, but it's a programmatic idea on what this Green Tower should envision and should bring to the city and to the site as an iconic idea. Now to the last slides about what we are doing now. Since it's a real project and not only a study, we are doing things already. Also Tom mentioned it. A lot of the buildings are taken apart. That's not only demolished, but taken apart to reuse the different materials of the buildings, from panels to concrete. We are reusing all the materials and the buildings of it. And what you see in front here is a new connection under the railroad tracks to the other side of the train tracks. So it also sometimes it also has to do with big engineering. So it's also, what our role is, that it needs to be also in certain places it has to do about, real heavy machinery. Now, what we also, after the tender, we cut into all kind of co-productions. We did a health impact assessment for Bijenskwartier. For now, I think it's too much content to dive into it, but we learned there from the co-research together what kind of let's say things work and what kind of ideas could not work. I will give a very precise example about that. And we try to detail more the public space. We are working on the detailed green zoning, what kind of trees, how can we adapt the shade, how can we adapt the sun conditions, what kind of food can be produced here, by who, how do we the maintenance of it, can we also participate with the people who are going to live here later on. So all these kind of questions come to mind and are working on it at this moment. Now, which gives some sort of images on it. So you see first ideas on this car-free public space with lots of lush trees. You see also the buildings, but it's an other kind of let's say atmosphere than it's being used to in Amsterdam, partly. Now, two very pragmatic examples to close off this story is about how we, let's say, what we do with these stories in the buildings itself. And a very pragmatic one, but it's very nice to show, I think, also to you, that when we make these buildings, we try to, let's say, stimulate you to take the stairs and to avoid the escalator. And how can you do that? What we learned from the research is that to make the staircase into some sort of experience by what you are, let's say, triggered to take the staircase at least to the 4th or the 5th floor and not take the escalator. So it's part of the design of the buildings at this moment to make the staircase into some sort of proactive way of moving around. Also a place where you can meet your neighbors, or it's also a place for green. So that's very real pragmatic, let's say, end result of our first starting points, where we research all kinds of possibilities. Now, and this is one of the images we're working at this moment. And to close it off for this moment, it's also where we started off. This is not something where what we can do as a company by ourselves. This is really something in a co-production, co-production with our partners, financial partners, co-production with the city of Amsterdam, but also co-production with a lot of people who are, let's say, far beyond our knowledge at some points. And we really try to search for these kind of networks to handle this project. So in short, we started with the research and we try to update the research constantly, but meanwhile also making the project into real heavy engineering. And I think that would be the main topic for us as a company now, in close relationship with the city of Amsterdam and all other parties. So Tom, I think this is what I presented for this moment.
Thank you very much, Johan, and I think that's a great overview of more, let's say, the general approach, as well as some very concrete examples of how health or health issues translate into different topics like green public space, but also the use of not escalators but of stairs. And you also mentioned that that you would like to think about also thinking about the user experiences, not only of inhabitants but also of people visiting the site. And I believe you are working on together with AMS on trying to set up a living lab in this project to also create that sort of interaction with different users around the site, and possibly also the people eventually that will start living there. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because it is quite experimental, right? It's something that is really in the initiative phase, and you're setting it up. Yeah.
Yeah, what we were very interested in is, let's say, the experiment in real life. So since we offer a real project, I think the combination with AMS is really strong there, because we have a test case, a real project, and it's in a scale where it's also, it's pragmatic. It can be done, and we can learn from it. And if there are lessons to be learned, we can also adapt that in the project later on. And what I would like to mention also about, let's say, social aspects. What in Holland is, we feel is something to really think about, is how you thuiskomen, how you come to your dwelling, and how's the approach to it. And a lot of times in these kind of urban complexes and heavy projects, you have this almost anonymous way of coming into your apartment, and also the experience of the outdoor space is quite anonymous. That's why we try to avoid the bigger parking spaces with a direct link to your apartment, for example, and also to try to stimulate the people to also adapt the public space and as their public space. So we try to also think about new ways of doing that. But this living lab condition is for us, the scale is right, and the combination of all this knowledge from AMS, from Wageningen, from the TU, to combine that knowledge into a real pragmatic project. I think that duo or that combo is really interested, and we are really looking forward for other projects and other, let's say, successful combos there coming time.
Yeah. I don't find it. If people have questions, please post them in the chat, because I think there probably are. At least I have a lot more, so I hope they come in. Because I also think that you mentioned a little bit about the setting where the site is, and it is a site that is very much in development. Not just your site, but also on the other side of the tracks, and well, along the water that is also bordering your site. To what extent is that something that you how do you cope with that, the fact that you have a site that is actually, it doesn't have any borders, because it also connects to all of these areas, and it's very important to also take into account the developments over there as how they influence your project. How do you manage that? What is your, do you have any?
It also has to do, Tom, I think, with the term sort of scale of the project, but also relating to the context. And what we try to do is to, when we try, for example, make some sort of energy network, try to think also ahead, who would also want to use that, or can we also provide something for somebody else? And so I think that's really a question to me, when what kind of scale of a city project is useful. When you're looking at the city as a whole, you can think about all kinds of ambitions, but when you're looking into a site, you have to be, at a certain point, you have to choose. And what we try to do is to be adaptable and to make the hard infrastructure in a way that also, let's say, our neighbors could benefit from it. And that's why we also have this a lot of talks with the city of Amsterdam. Dries will also mention it probably a bit on that, why we try to say, like, okay, what kind of program are you going to make there? What can we provide with our project? For example, this is something, it's not really romantic to talk about it, but for example, energy consumption and production has to do with the amount of PV panels, with the amount of installations. So to do that in a bigger scale, that has advantages. But when the scale is getting too big, it's getting anonymous. So we try to help each other a bit out on a pragmatic level, Tom, and also to be aware. I think that's also something, to be aware of neighbors doing something, helping out. Let's say, okay, you need that road on a certain moment. What can we do to help you speed up that accessibility? So that's a bit of a neighborship, so to say. I think it's a lot has to do with normal communications, Tom. So that's what we try to do, to be open for it.
Okay, great. Some questions came in, and I think that's something we can definitely continue. But you already made a little bit of a bridge to the story of Dries, and I think if we hear the story of the city of Amsterdam, we can come back to some of the issues you've just pointed out. Because of course the city and its, especially its planners have a role to play there, of course, in communicating in a way that also you can you have a good feel of what is changing outside of the project that you need to sort of take into account in the project itself. So Dries, thank you for being with us, and I think that the connection that Johan has made is very clear, but we also want to hear more about that role the city planning office plays in these developments, and this emergent issue of health being an important topic that citizens have also put on the agenda of the politicians, and that of course then is something that of a challenge to you and your colleagues to get your head around. But I know the city of Amsterdam is very knowledgeable, and you have already made some steps with health and healthy urban living. And we're very anxious to hear about those steps that you've taken, but also, of course, a more general approach as to your view on how the city is changing and what the role of the city planners is to address those changes. So thank you for being with us, and thank you for sharing your thoughts about that. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Tom. I have no presentation. I've just a short introduction, and maybe we can spend more time for the discussion or questions, because I was triggered about the presentation from Johan, and I wanted to discuss it, but I have lots of time with Johan to discuss about the bias project. I want to have a lot of time for the discussion with the whole group in the seminar. My name is Dries Drogenijk. I'm the manager for the urban development of the eastern side of Amsterdam. So I work for the city government. And everybody who knows Amsterdam knows that building houses is the main issue for the city government. But I think that sustainable development is as important as building so much houses as possible. And I think the last few years, sustainability is just a normal issue for in the urban development as our business. And I come to the project and also to the policy that is now being made. The sustainable development, we know that for already a lot of years. It has to do about energy, circular development, nature inclusive building, clean air, rainproof, and we have now healthy conditions as a next step. Living labs are part of our job every day. I remember that Centrum Island, that is one of the islands of the Eiberg Peninsula. 5 years ago, we put a goal as an energy neutral island and for 1,500 dwellings. And by that time, we thought we have no idea if that's possible. But now the houses are built, the first people are living there, and it's possible. At that time, it cost a price for the city, but I think when we put that aim on the market now, it doesn't cost extra money because we are learning so fast. For example, we also put plots on the market for commercial housing, and they are energy and the energy producing houses, and we learn so fast that's normal almost today. But for the bias, that's a different part. You asked about the role of the city, but the bias was owned by the national government. The city government made a program for the competition to put the bias on the market. And that was about price, quality, and sustainable goals. And at that moment, healthy conditions was not issued like that. And I think what is very interesting, you can call it a happy incident or a side catch of the project that Johan talked about, is that we learned so fast about this next issue in urban development that Amsterdam, my colleagues from from another department, they have now just made the policy of the healthy city. And Amsterdam has now that policy, and it contains of 12 themes, and you can see all the themes in the project from the bias quartier. So the city is a living lab. We, as manager for projects, we try to make conditions in projects to learn about developments, learn about the issues. Healthy conditions is I think a very important issue, but it's pretty new if you compare it to other sustainable goals like energy I mentioned. But it's incredible how fast we learn, and I'm wondering if in a few years we see how bias Quartier has developed, what we what we put on the market for a next project to come to a higher standard on this issue. So I'm very interested that in bioequity, it's part of the integrated view on this project. And that for me is a showcase about the city as a living lab. So Tom, I can imagine that there are a lot of issues to discuss about the city as a place for living labs, this project as a good example. And once again, then we have to circle around the city government that makes a new policy to put a to make a next step on this issue. And so the circle is around, and I think that your program and Federico, you can help us to implement this kind of issues and maybe other issues that Federico put in his introduction to the future to improve the city and our projects. I think that's for this moment.
Thank you, Dries. I think you touched upon a couple of things that I find very very interesting, because it speaks a little bit also to the transition of thinking in terms of plans and projects. Maybe a little bit referencing to what Leendert was talking about, that we're crossing over to see things as something that is evolving constantly, and the city is evolving, the projects are evolving, and that as soon as you start a highly ambitious project, which is, has all of these different innovative criteria in it, that you actually said in your example, well, when we actually saw it materialize, we learned a lot from it, and we can implement those lessons in other projects. My question to you is, do you think that in this day and age, those new demands are they following up each other much more quickly than let's say 10 years ago? Is that something that is also pushing you to think about how do we organize that sort of innovation ecosystem, because we constantly need to adapt to these new demands? Is that the pace of change? Is it sort of accelerated?
Oh, I think you're right. It has to do about the issues in this time, but I think it's also important to figure out that we are now building, let's say, 10,000 dwellings a year in Amsterdam, and 10, 15 years ago it was just 3,000-4,000. So we have many more projects to learn about. So I think if you look at acceleration as an issue, it has to do about two issues. Yes, it's important, but also we have more places, more projects to learn, and I think we benefit from that.
Yeah. But one aspect is that you have to learn from it and you benefit from it. I think in the old days when the planning office was, there were doctors in white sort of white coats that sort of sketched out how the city will sort of be developed. You now are also talking. You said, well, we have to do it with the others, with the knowledge institutes, with the developers, with all the different advisors that Johan has mapped out in his sketch of who they are developing this project with. So I think that's really interesting to see what kind of structure of governance or of communication is emerging from that, right? I mean, I mean, now we have all of these Zoom sessions due to the pandemic, but I guess you do have a lot of these talks, right? How has your practice in that sense changed as a planner for the city?
How it changed? There's a difference in the eastern side of Amsterdam, for everybody who knows that place. For example, the Eiburg area and Zeeburger Island, the land is owned by the city government, and we are pretty traditional as an owner of the land. We make we make the plans in the white coats in our offices, and we sell the land or whatever. We have a competition. But in transformation projects and in these days, that was actually the most of our work. It can not be done in another way, as Johan mentioned, about co-production with lots of institutions, private markets, the national government, whatever. And then you have to discuss a lot more. And I think our city government has to be more flexible about their goals, because we don't, if you don't own the land or the buildings, it's much harder to put a goal, what you want to have on that in that project. So we have to be more flexible, and that asks for another policy about project development. But we learn fast about the new roles from the markets and the city government, and that's very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe Johan, if you can join us in this discussion, because as you explained, the practice of the area developer has also changed, particularly in this project. And I imagine that it's not in every project that it's so ambitious and innovative, but I guess at least the demands of the people that will eventually live and work there in your area are changing, so you have to take them into account. But there is a question about the feasibility of that in terms of maybe not purely financial, but also in terms of feasible, in terms of can we actually do all the work that is necessary to involve everyone and get all the information and knowledge that we need. And but the question is specifically about that financial feasibility, and if I read it correctly from Remco, that he's impressed by it. But can you talk a little bit about to what extent is investing in healthy urban development not just, does it also have a spin-off that is outside or more than just from the project itself? Because we know from gebiedsontwikkeling that we tend to talk about that the project can finance itself, so to speak, right? So the cost will be recouped by the benefits of the development. But what is the concept or approach from IM for this project?
Now, in broad sense, it has to do also with your motivation as a company. Eh? What do you want to be as a kind of company, and what kind of project do you want to make? It has to. It all starts with ambition. So yeah, we really wanted to do something special and also to research what could be possible. But financially, I think. What we learn, it's also research. Tom, I even did that on the MCD-opleiding. We research on what dictates let's say is crucial for the dwelling and the way people live somewhere and have some sort of relationship to it, and also financially are willing to pay for a dwelling. That has to do with an atmosphere where you feel comfortable, where you have some sort of idea of this is my neighborhood and I really want to be here. That also drives. Makes a project not more feasible, but then you can do also these kind of ambitions. But it all has to do, Tom, with scale. And we see in Holland a lot of ambitions on building complex scale, and we feel that to really co-work and co-produce, you also need to have some time and understanding of each other, city, all kind of other parties, and to say like, yeah, we are going to work on this together. And the way we do now, it's sometimes it works, but yeah, it also has to do with the intrinsic motivation of these teams. But we feel we want to deliver projects for the city and for, let's say, Holland, which are, yeah, that's what we want to do. Not everywhere always, but yeah, that has to do with our own motivation also. And in the longer term, when you make a good, nice, inspirational project, it makes life more fun. I think it's also important, and it also delivers, yeah, better projects. But the maximization of profit, that's not our primary goal. We just, yeah, we need to earn money, but it also has to do with delivering relevant projects to the city. And yeah, so that's what we can. So a lot is possible when you're working on the right scale. And we see a bit, not necessarily the reason in Amsterdam, but it is a question about speed. 3 years ago, nobody was talking about biodiversity, and but when you see all these kind of ambitions struggling around, and when you have this building plot scale, yeah, that scale is sometimes too difficult to do all these projects. And then so the biosecurity in terms of scale, I think it's really a good scale to test and to be able to test because you have time, but not too much time. I think it's also important to not have too much time because then you're forced to to conclude on something. So yeah, that's what we feel about it. Also, yeah, sorry to it has to do a lot about fun. So this morning even I was with the team, yeah, but with a personal note. When you personally can work with all these kind of guys and teams and companies, yeah, that's makes life more happy, more fun. That's also, but it's a naive one probably. But I think for the coming years in Holland, when we want to make 1 million houses, yeah, it better be fun also because it's hard work, and don't underestimate the amount of work. From both sides, from city and from us as a company. It's a lot of work, but nice to work on, Tom. Yeah, that's what would be my answer.
Okay, thank you. And I'll come back. I'll come back to you. And I think that what you're saying is, if I can say that the scaling is coming back in your answer, so that the scale of the project and of course its program allows you to invest in these more innovative and experimental issues, because that is the character of the project and the ambitions that you put into it. One question, Dries, to scale up, so to speak, and more broadly, and you've already sort of mentioned that, if I have understood you correctly, that you're learning from projects like Biosecurity in as to what you could prescribe or talk and negotiate with other actors in other projects. But one of the more formal, let's say, planning briefs that you put out, that you produce and publish, is omgevingsvisie, and there is a question about that. Can you talk a little bit about the relevance of health, or specifically also the healthy urban living in that process towards the omgevingsvisie 2050? Can you talk a little bit about what you know of it? Please share.
Yeah, that's fine, because I read the concept omgevingsvisie in good Dutch, and it's 220 pages. I read it 2-3 times for my work. That's part of the deal, let's say that. But it's incredible. It's not impossible product, of course, and because what was it say? Amsterdam in 2050, and it has it contains all issues of this time and looks forward for the next 30 years. And after that, we make plans and programs about it. It's an incredible, difficult product, but healthy is an issue in that product, and it's one of those new mentioned policies that is will be part of the projects for the next decades, I think. And what I mentioned, I think everybody can Google the new policy that I'm for the healthy city of Amsterdam. It has 12 issues. Some of them are very easy. Sport is around the corner. Yeah, why not? Everybody has right on clean air, of course, but if it's very hard to fix it, because when you work on it, you learn that it's always much more difficult to reach that goal than just mention a topic like sport is around the corner, because we know in many neighborhoods sport isn't around the corner. So how can we fix it? And the omgevingsvisie as a product it makes a road for the next 20 years to come to those goals that are very abstract at this moment, but we learn from Living Labs that it's possible. And in 10, 20 years, we are much further, and then we put new goals with a new omgevingsvisie. I think that's interesting for the omgevingsvisie as a big product for the next 10 years compared to the issue for this session today.
Okay, thank you. Leendert, perhaps if you hear these examples and talks so far, do you think that the Living Labs will also be that some of them will grow into something that is more has a stable contribution to the topic that it works on? So, for example, the growth of food in the city or other things, or do you think that they will be maybe abolished at one point and then you create a new Living Lab? Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, I do have some experience with innovation, and there are always new words in the future for doing what we do. So I don't know if the word Living Lab will last to 10 years. But my view is that, and what I like about what Dries said and what Johan said, is that to learn in an innovation ecosystem, in our terminology, let's say it's easy to learn and experiment because the goal is to learn. It is harder to learn in real estate development because the goal is to deliver real estate. And it's even harder to learn from real estate development to real estate development. And that goes, most of the time, it goes too slow. So what Dries tells is that he is generating a learning system where he learns from real estate development to real estate development. And I think let's say the adventure which gebiedsontwikkeling went into is that experimentation is a part of the real estate development. So it is not set at front, no, it's integral in the development. And that's adventurous. There are some risks involved. And one thing which is very difficult to accept is risks in real estate development. So you have to be really careful, what are those risks? So, and basically with food and with climate and with energy, and why we do these Living Labs, or in another term, urban innovation ecosystems, is that we have to learn faster, otherwise we are too slow. So learning in real estate development and sharing lessons where you have not solved the problem yet, if we can manage to arrive at that in portfolios of real estate on topics like food, on topics like mobility, on topics like energy, then we go a little bit faster solving these really urgent global problems. So I think Living Labs are crucial, are essential, but also we are, let's say, modest. It's just a word. It's about learning and replicating. And I think slowly this is happening, and slowly it's starting to reveal its fruits.
Thank you. I see that now we have some more talks from the chat, and if I can connect a few, and Federico, you've also put in a mention about, there was a question about to Johan about the buildings, the other buildings that you will be developing in the area, which are also partly high-rise buildings, and that you've explained the green tower that that was in your presentation. But the question is about what I would maybe call transition spaces. So it's between the home and the public space, and the further beyond, of course, the site itself, that you're thinking about in your explanation. How do people transition through these spaces, and can we do that? Can we stimulate them to do that more in a more healthy way? And that the aspect of routing and trying to think about how people move through the area is something. But will that also be part of the other buildings? Was one question. And the other is, how do you see the perspective of AM as a developer moving beyond the physical real estate, let's say, building and environment that you're creating, but rather to patterns of behavior and patterns of how people move through areas and actually experience here. So these two questions, could you address them?
Now, the first one is I just showed one building, but it's let's say the essence of the plan and of all the buildings is to think about the transition of. So in every building will be special attention for that. And I really like this, what Federico mentioned in the beginning, that let's say it's not only the sport kind of way, but also the mental way. And what we learned also from this COVID situation is that people find it very important to meet up, to have a place to relax, to work a bit somewhere. So yeah, in every building will be a place for that, also relating to specific target groups. So when you're with the family, you have other needs than when you're alone. You have not only other needs, but there are some specific needs. So we try to address that in every building. And the other question was about, no, I forgot the second question, Tom.
Whether the general approach, as Dries has explained, that he learns from different projects and they take it into the playing office and move that beyond Bias Kwartier project into all the other neighborhoods to try to implement those lessons.
Of course. We constantly, that's the let's say problem when you're a market in this kind, you constantly need to learn and to also be able to implement it. And so it's learning, implement, and then some sort of feedback, what is not working. So we had all kind of perhaps more little things. They proved not to work. Then we can say, we're not going to do that if it's not working. So and when we learn in one project, we can address it in another project somewhere else in Holland. But in general topic, what we see is that let's say the questions in Holland are that difficult and that complex. The climate, water adaptation, ecosystems, all kind of, and also the dwellings itself. It's that complex that we feel as a company that we need to also adapt, and also to be able to work together with all kind of other parties. We feel that it's necessary to work also in the next coming years on these kind of topics. We're really having perhaps personally a bit worry idea on it. We really have an enormous task ahead of us, also in being pragmatic. It's not only looking ahead, but also to make things and to do things. So that's, we try to do that a bit. Learning by doing. That's really nice, Tom.
Thank you, Johan. I want to move a little bit to one of the things that has been now mentioned a couple of times in the chat, and maybe to Dries and Federico. Okay, Federico, maybe to start with you, the part of mental health. You've mentioned this in your introduction, that this part is usually a little bit obscured or paid less attention to, or maybe it's people take it as something as a given. It will follow from the more the other aspects of health and trying to have enough green spaces, etc. Do you think that this poses a new challenge to planners? And I guess then I'll come to Dries to see whether that is a topic that they are addressing in the city of Amsterdam. But do you think it's in general a new topic, or is it something that has been emerging for a while now? Mental health for urban citizens.
No, I agree. It's definitely the new frontier of urban health for planning, mental health. It is one of the most rapidly, let's say, growing type of complaints related to health in our societies is explicitly related to dense urban areas. There is a higher incidence in dense urban areas. Clinical psychologists, clinical neurologists, they have demonstrated that there is a relation, but they don't know actually what is the clear causal relation between which particular aspect of cities and which particular sicknesses or mental health complaints. So we actually have a lot to discover there and a lot to try. We don't have clear solutions. But what I would like to point out is that we can't address this new and quite global problem just by using old tools. That's important. Old tools like greening, for example, which is very important, but it is an old tool that belongs to the modernist idea of planning. Already with the garden city, we're talking about green and proximate to living space. So we need to do it differently. We need to do it better. And just to pinpoint that, maybe giving a bridge to Dries, I also read the concept version of the omgevingvisie a couple of times. And under the voice of Gezondestad, I agree there is too much, but having a particular and strong definition of what health means for Amsterdam would help a lot in the long run. And if we reduce health to healthy movement, so sport, walking, this is good, it's fair, but I think it's not enough. The aging, it's not definitely necessarily covered by that. So aging population also requires a different approach to health, which is related more to well-being and to addressing loneliness, to addressing mental issues, but also the young population. We have areas in the city that are fully equipped for sport and movement. But these areas are not used. I mean, look at areas like New West or even the Balmer. They have plenty of green and plenty of places where you can actually walk. But people don't walk there. And they actually consume, maybe in some cases, very unhealthy food. So that's not enough. We need to find a model that integrates urban health deeply in all the aspects of planning, in my view.
Well, Dries, here's to you. Can you respond or elaborate a little bit on that? Because as it's clear, this is as Federico has explained, this is very emergent, right? We are becoming more aware, and we have become maybe we've been pressed upon it by Corona and the COVID pandemic, that this dimension exists and that we really need to address it, especially also among young people. But can you talk a little bit about that, or how you are, what you see around you with your
I think it's an interesting issue, but also a little bit a new way of mentioning old thoughts, maybe also what Federico already mentioned. And in Amsterdam, we have a big tradition that in 10-15 minutes, you have to be able, wherever you are in the city, to be in a rural area. And that's the concept of the city. And I think that is very important to protect the green zones around the city. So, and as a mall, contra mall for the dense areas in the inner city compared to those green areas that are pretty close. You can walk there or you can go there by bike. And in those days, for example, me myself, I go walking around during the day for at least 1 hour. I didn't do that when I'm sitting just in the office, but now I do it every day. And then I experienced that really I live just close to one of those areas that is just 10-15 minutes away. And then I really unstress. And the issue is important, but maybe it's also possible work on it with all tools. And then green is very important, and also a mix of atmospheres is important. And those are issues that we know already. And I don't want to suggest that it's not important, but maybe it's for in Amsterdam, building houses is the most important of everything. So I think when we discuss longer on it, I always ask you, but what do I have to do? Do I have to build houses or mention other things?
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah.
I agree with Dries. Indeed, I think the problem wouldn't help maybe to say that there is something more important than building houses. Just to say, I know it's a taboo in Amsterdam, but it doesn't mean that we have to stop building houses. We can say we want a healthy city. That's the priority. And then the houses that will be built will have to comply to that priority. I mean, I think this is a political decision after all. That's why I'm curious to see how the omgeving visie will go.
Yes, I think well, Amsterdam is a perfect example, but I think there's many cities in the Netherlands, of course, where politicians have been pressing the let's say that their housing ambitions onto all the planners, and to say, well, you know, we really need to address that, and then planners need to sort of push back a little bit on that. But of course, it's very delicate because of the role politicians play. But I believe that Dries, you've tried to explain that quite perfectly. So it is an ongoing discussion, and I think we need to be, I think, and then connecting to Leonard again, to see how we can, you know, collect the knowledge and the insights that will inform politicians also about, well, how can we integrate this new demand for housing and not lose perspective on what we want to create, namely a healthy city that is healthy for everyone. So that's really a continuing story. Leonard, I mentioned you because one of the earlier in the chat, one of the people listening in also mentioned that to what extent can the living lamps also be a place, so a place where urban inhabitants can visit, or maybe play, or maybe do things that are related to the topic that the Living Lab is for. Do you already have some experience in that a Living Lab can become a place in a community as well, that it can play a community role?
Yes, Tom, there are of course many initiatives of citizens doing things together to improve their neighborhood. So very bottom-up approaches all around Amsterdam and in Rotterdam on food and on sharing goods. A few of the labs we are developing is one is the Marinetrein Amsterdam Living Lab, very downtown. Which is an old defense area, which is now slowly taken over by the Rijksvastgoedbedrijf together with the city of Amsterdam to try to develop a future-proof city or a suburb. And there, from the start, the terrain is available and open for neighborhood and for passers-by. And what you see is that they start to use the terrain how they like. So it is a very popular swimming area in the summer, even so popular that it's too full during Corona times. And now we have developed this in a place where more and more the people who enter know that they are being monitored by several types of sensors, and that they participate in the development of new sensor systems which are privacy-proof. And they consent to this by entering. In the Bijskwartier Green Tower, my colleague Aranka is now working together with colleagues from Bijskwartier Ontwikkeling to make important part of the living lab an educational route through the experiments. That is good for the educational and the fun part for visitors, but experiments also need test persons and people who comment. So there, the design is to go hand in hand on those two. Other labs are more, let's say, in the building or renovation of houses. And there it is that people, individual house owners or future renters, enter in their own interest. So there's a whole variety, and involving them and asking the right questions in co-creation, that is crucial. And I would like to say one thing is that what we know is we have a master program on metropolitan design engineering, and all the students in the second year have to build a living lab, and they go out with a total open mindset to build their lab together with citizens. There are some fantastic results, and some of them also implemented on the marine terrain. Others are on the digital terrain. Others are on campus. So it takes skills to engage citizens. And many citizens want, but they want it for real. They don't want it for fake. They recognize it.
Great, thank you. That's really interesting, and I believe you've extended the answer actually from placemaking around specific labs to the way you interact more generally with the public. Federico, I want to come back to you. Also trying to also integrate some of the things that are put into the chat. Maybe one thing that we haven't touched upon, one of the conclusions you mentioned, and which is the preparedness part. Well, I think we've talked a lot about maybe territorial scale and or rescaling, as you've explained. Being open to the community and let them participate in the especially living labs and the innovations, mental and physical health. But preparedness, can you take us a little bit into more, maybe it's more conceptual, but what would a more prepared city look like in terms of what can its physical features add to that? What can it contribute to being more prepared?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Actually, this comes from the contribution of the former alderman of spatial planning in Milan, Alessandro Balducci, which gave a presentation at our studio about how Milan reacted to the pandemic. And we know that was one of the centers to be heavily, let's say, hit by the pandemic right at the beginning, before many other cities in Europe. So they started to reflect what went wrong there. And they had some sort of privilege, among brackets, point of view, because they were the first to have to deal with the pandemic in Europe. Then we all learned a bit of how they did it. We all looked at them a bit. So what they said is that for them was crucial to have a well-working system of territorial care. Territorial care meaning all the healthcare services that are very proximate to where people live, to where there is a dense concentration of inhabitants. So they didn't have this system working, and that system collapsed during the pandemic. The same could be told by many other cities, where, and this is a bit of the problem of the way we thought about health care in the last decades. So we looked for concentrating healthcare in a highly multifunctional and integrated healthcare services, usually around hospitals, which have a lot of expertise of different kinds in it, and they have research and care. Think about the Amsterdam IMC as one of the examples. Well, we see that that's not enough, and that's in the case of the preparedness against the pandemic. Probably we need an urban environment which integrates healthcare and in all different scales. So, for example, my question to Johan would be whether he sees any possibility of integrating some essential healthcare services within that neighborhood. whether, and a question I would ask to the municipality is whether we could, for example, think in terms of minimum healthcare provision per square kilometers or something like this. We have that for the parking spaces. Maybe we could think that also in terms of health provision. I mean, just to speculate a bit about this. But that was the idea of preparedness that came out of the studio.
Thank you. Johan, do you have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, the question.
Maybe do something with it in the Bijeskwartier, maybe very concrete. I don't know.
Yeah, we have a it's very specific, but we have a small health center in the project, which consists of these kind of healthcare, but also adaptable. So it's not like a dentist, but a space where can be adaptable to the future needs. But that's our answer, because we thought that we're going to make a small neighborhood. 1,300 dwellings, let's say 2,000 to 3,000 people. It's a small village, or a real neighborhood. What is needed to become also of meaning to those people? To have, so a health center was to us very important, but also local childcare. That's part of the program. A small shop to buy stuff, goods. It also has to do with the bestemmingsplan. It's a good Dutch tradition to make a bestemmingsplan and to indicate what kind of function could be where or should be where. And I think that would be very interesting to be more, let's say, flexible also on that case. To be at this moment as a company, we constantly do all kind of blurring concepts. So is it a shop? Is it an office? Is it a dwelling? Is it healthcare? I don't know. It's a vibrant place, or it's a specific place, and it's very difficult to put that in these bestemmingsplan boxes. So that would be our response. And what I also thought about when this discussion went on about programming, and we have some sort of idea in Holland to be very specific on the program. That many square meters should be there, and that many bicycles and that many carpet. But to not over-program, to leave something out. I'm not sure whose line that is, but it's from somebody. Leave something out, so that we can adapt with square meters or with something else to later on. In Holland, we have a fine tradition to over-plan at certain points. So, like we were very specific within the building, 220 housings, social, all kind of. And it's almost becoming some sort of irrational mathematical. You cannot mathematize the city life. It's a living organism. I think that would be also interesting to be more flexible in planning, also to us, and from our side of as a company to be able to move to something else. Because this tender was 3 years ago. Who have thought at that time that we would be in this situation now? So I really support Dries when you have to make a plan for 2050, and as a company we really like that when a city and somebody else, let's say, sets goals, more generic goals. Our ambition is, and how to reach that goal, to leave that a bit open, to drive for. A common ambition, and to be able to specify that later, because these PV panels are also very specific, very pragmatic. Every year they're becoming cheaper, and every year they're becoming better. So when you specify a goal at this moment, that goal would be not so ambitious in 5 years, but you can specify the approach to it. So that would be our. Back to the question: what do we do as a company? We leave some program open, and we try to also do something for the people who are going to live, work, and stay there. But that's what we do. Small healthcare, small daycare.
Wonderful, Dries. I'm coming to you in a minute to ask you to give some kind of an advice, maybe to especially the planners in the audience and the students, especially maybe who are still with us. But I'd like to also wrap up because it's almost 5 o'clock. I think it's been a wonderful talk and some really interesting more generic insights about where we are when we talk about health in the urban environment, and when we work on the urban environment every day, what we run into, what kind of challenges, and how we are trying to address them and solve them. Thank you, Federico, for giving us the conclusions of the Master Studio, the wonderful points and a wonderful collaboration. Thank you, Leendert and Johan, for your your preparedness for today. And we are going to continue this theme throughout 2021 with 2 more sessions. I think one before summer and one after, about healthy area development and healthy urbanization in general, to talk with you about that and share new insights, more insights from other speakers as well that are working on this very important topic every day. So thank you for being with us. And perhaps Dries, could you give us an advice when you're a planner who is maybe starting his or her career? What can you share with us?
Be as long as flexible as you can. I want to be flexible. I want to work on adaptable plans. I want to leave a lot of space open in plans, but the context for me as working for the city government is that I have very specific goals, and that's our context for working. And so my advice is stay as long as possible flexible and open and adaptable. That's it.
Thank you very much. I think that's a perfect advice. Thank you, Dries. Thank you all for being with us, and I hope to see you next time. I'm Tom. I hope to see you all, and we are very happy to also share more thoughts about this issue on gebiedsontwikkeling.nu, which is our website. So please visit it and follow us. Thank you all, and have a very good evening.
Oh.